Ladies and gentlemen, how are we all doing? Welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. Of course, if you're watching this as a live stream, welcome. Say hello in the chat and I'll be reading out all your comments because we've got an absolute corker of a podcast coming up for you today. We've got lots of things to talk about. We're going to be talking about Oxford United's mid-season review. We're going to be talking about everything that's going on at Oxford United in the first half of the season. Now, I know what you're thinking, Jack. We're not exactly halfway through the season in terms of games played. I understand that. However, we would have been if we didn't have 7 games postponed. So bear with me. We are going to be doing our season, our match season sort of thing. We're going to be going through the games. We're going to be going through all of the different things that are going on this season. I'm going to be discussing all of the things that's happened, and we're going to be doing a little review of it as well on today's episode of the podcast. The reason why I'm doing this as a podcast today is because, of course, we did have another postponement. Oxford United game against Northampton at the weekend. That was very, very disappointing, of course. I wasn't very happy about that, as I'm sure many Oxford United fans were. It was very, very disappointing to have another game postponed because, it's just more games postponed and more games Oxford United can't play, and another weekend for Oxford United fans in which we don't have a game. So it was a big blow, and it was, unfortunately, quite frustrating. It wasn't COVID related, of course, this weekend. It was a waterlogged pitch, which is a little bit frustrating. Either way, it's quite frustrating, but a waterlogged pitch is a little bit frustrating, especially at this level. It's very unlikely you get waterlogged pitches. So yeah, I'm very, very annoyed about that. If you're joining the stream, say hello. I know we've got a few people in there right now. Say hello, because we've got lots of things to talk about. We're going to be talking about everything Oxford United so far this season. The mid-season review. It's a nice roundup of this mid-season, and hopefully everything is okay in the stream. Hopefully the audio is okay. Hopefully all of that is okay. And running well. If you are watching this and the audio and everything is okay, I'm just going to have a quick check to make sure everything is. I think it is. From what I'm watching, I think it is okay. So yeah, this will be fantastic. If we get people in, share it, like it, whatever you need to do, this is going to be very, very interesting because we've got a lot of things to talk about. Of course, we started the Oxford United season. We did start a little bit slow. We started very, very poorly. I'd say that's how we started. We did have a tough start to the season. I think we can all agree that we did have a very, very difficult start to the season. We did have some very, very difficult fixtures. We had Lincoln away, which is a very, very difficult game. We had obviously then Sunderland at home, which again is an extremely difficult game. And both of those games, unfortunately, we did lose, which isn't ideal. We want to try and start the season, with a winning start. Try and get that first win as early as you can and build on there, and then have a good start to the season. However, for Oxford United, that wasn't the case this season, and for a while it hasn't been the case. I think since Carl Robinson's come in, I'd say we have struggled a little bit with starting strong. We've struggled a little bit with starting early, and that sort of thing. We have struggled with that early first few games, or even quite a few games this season, but quite a few games we've started, and quite a few seasons under Carl Robinson, we have started a little bit slow. But, and that was no different this season. We did start slow. We lost 2-0 to Lincoln and we lost 2-0 to Sunderland. I think at that point, a few people would think, especially after the Lincoln game, I think we were a little bit... Well, you can go back and watch the podcast episodes from back then, but I definitely think against Lincoln, I think it was a little bit mixed. It was a little bit like... it was the first game. Lincoln looked good. We didn't look great, but we just take it. And we have to just try and improve and go on. Hopefully that was just not hopefully that's not the start... hopefully we don't start as hopefully we don't continue in the way that we started. I think that's the best way of putting it. Unfortunately, we did in the second game against Sunderland. It wasn't a great first 2 games. It got quite early, and it wasn't too long before a lot of people started questioning the manager and started really, really sort of putting Carl Robinson under some serious pressure, and really sort of asking some questions about Carl Robinson. We did get our first win again, obviously then against Accrington after that, 4-1. It looked good. We looked like we were getting back into the swing of things. A 4-1 was big, of course. That's a +3 goal difference. It helps towards obviously the -4 goal difference we had in our first 2 games, and it looked okay. It looked okay. It looked a little bit better after that Accrington game, and I think we all then thought we've got to push on from that. That's where we want to be. We have to push on from that 4-1 defeat. And I think a lot of people can agree that we didn't really push on from there. We then had a very, very difficult game against Peterborough, if you remember, and it wasn't very... We didn't take then too much away from the Accrington game, because I remember the podcast episodes, and I'm sure if you remember, even you're leaving the chat as well, I've got a lot of questions to ask you, so try and get as many people as we can in there, because it's going to be a really, really interesting episode. Because it was like many, after most of the games, especially obviously after the wins we had, the very few wins we had at the start of the season, it was like, can we go and win that game, and then can we go and take the confidence and the positives from that game, then can we go and transfer over to into the next game, and that's what we wanted to do. That's what we were asking so much as fans. We really wanted to hope that we could do that. And we just didn't. We didn't do it. If we did get a win, like for example against Accrington, we then struggled to take anything from that Accrington game into the next game. And that's where the worry was, because then, there was a game in between Peterborough, into the Gillingham defeat, 3-1. It wasn't great, it was 3-1. I remember we were 2-0 down at half time, then Dan Adjei made it 2-1. We thought we could get back into this game. There's something that we can get out of this game. We created so many chances and couldn't put any of them away. We dominated the opposition, but we just were not clinical. We were creating the chances that we know that we normally would score, and it's very, very, it does happen a lot that we do score those chances, but we just didn't score enough chances, and we didn't take our chances, and that's what's going to cost you in this division. It's going to cost you in football, really. And we really, really did struggle, and then we lost to Gillingham. We then lost to Peterborough as well, and I remember then this was happening. It was first 5 games, 1 win out of 5 games, and 4 defeats. You are really starting to think, what is going on? We look at last season. The way that we ended last season before the lockdown, sort of like taking away the playoffs. We look at sort of like pre-lockdown, what was going on there, and that unbelievable run we were on, the momentum, the winning mentality, the winning, winning was just in our blood at that point. We were on an unbelievable run, and then we start this season so badly. We start this season in just horrific way. We don't look good going forward. We look shaky defensively. We can't get hold of a game in midfield. We've got a few people joining the chat right now. Say hello. It's just incredible. It was just incredible how poor we were across the field, and especially when we did lose players in the summer. I think we should take that in mind. We did lose Rob Dickie, but we lost one important player, a very important player, Rob Dickie. He did sort of command that back line. He did sort of really sort of stabilise that back line. And when you do miss a player like Rob Dickie, it will cause problems. But, it was frustrating that. But is that one player going to change what happens throughout the field? I don't really know. And clearly it was causing some serious problems, because we lost to Peterborough as well. And it started getting a little bit messy at that point. I remember thinking, when you're taking 3 points out of a possible 15... it's not looking great. It's really not looking great. And then we took it into the MK Dons home game, and that was a game we had to win. It was a game at home. We did have a few postponed games in there, I believe, as well. And a few home games in there that we weren't able to play. And then we had MK Dons at home, and that was a must-win game. We needed to win that game, and we needed to win it well. And we did win it 3-2, and it was a good game. It was a good game. We got 3 points, which is the most important thing. It wasn't a convincing win. It wasn't a 3-0, 4-0. Let's push on and take lots of positives and dominate the game. We were the better side. We won the game. We got the 3 points. We won the game 3-2. And at that point, that was another key example of, can we take those 3 points? Can we take that confidence from that MK Dons game and then move it on to the next game? We had a very, very difficult game against Charlton. I remember this was the first game in which I didn't do a match reaction for, because I remember I was away on holiday, so I didn't do the Charlton match reaction. I watched the game and I thought, we've got to take something from this MK Dons game. We've got to take that confidence into Charlton. Not an easy place to take confidence into. That's one of the last places. To go to the Valley and try and get a result is one of the most difficult places to go. Cole Robinson's obviously his ex-team that he managed. A very, very good side. And we couldn't do that. We lost the game 2-0 there, and I remember thinking, this is getting a little bit worrying now. Yes, we won the MK Dons game, but we're just not taking anything into the next game, and that's the thing we had to try and do, and we so desperately need to do, was try and take aspects of the previous game and try and take it into the next game, and we weren't able to do that. We really struggled in doing that. Then we had to go to Fleetwood, and Fleetwood are a bogey team. If you know Oxford, you've been following Oxford for a while, we don't beat Fleetwood. We just don't beat Fleetwood. And we went to Fleetwood, again, needing a result. And going to your bogey team, trying to get a result and desperately needing a result is not easy, and not an ideal situation to go to, especially not on bad form, obviously. And we went to Fleetwood and lost that game as well. And I remember at this point thinking, we are in really, really, really deep trouble. Really deep trouble. We were really low down in the table, as you can imagine, only taking 2 wins from our opening 7 odd games. It was poor, really poor situation to be in, and we needed a reaction. We needed a reaction from that Fleetwood game. We conceded after, I think it was about 30 seconds Not even short on that. It's about 20 seconds we conceded. It was a really good goal, I remember. First time volley. I think it was a half volley into the top left corner. We conceded really early, and it worried me. It really, really did worry me. At that point, I was really concerned about it. Because, that was a defeat against Peterborough, a win against MK Dons, but then 2 defeats on the bounce again, and I thought this could be a bit of an issue, and people were asking for him to be sacked, and I think people were asking Karl Robinson to be sacked, and I think it was very unlikely very, very unlikely that he was going to be sacked. He just signed a long-term deal. It probably wasn't going to happen, but you can imagine, and it's the thing in football, it's the thing with all sports, and you've got a manager and you've got a fan base behind them, and you're going to have criticism. You're going to have to be able to take criticism when you're in a really, really bad run. Many people were giving that criticism, me included. I had the podcast at that point, and I definitely was. I definitely was giving that criticism out, and I definitely was. Saying that things have to change and we have to improve, but we just desperately have to improve. I remember saying that, and if any of you were watching that as a podcast back then, you remember that we were demanding improvement, and we were demanding that we changed the way. And he probably wasn't going to get sacked. It was very unlikely that he was going to get sacked, but at the same time, you just think something needed to change, whether that was in the management or whether that was on the team. And I remember saying this as well. I remember saying the management isn't going to change. We're not going to sack a manager. We've just given I think it was a 3 or 4 year contract we gave Karl Robinson at the start of the season. It wasn't going to happen. The payout compensation of sacking a manager, you've just given them a contract for 3 to 4 years, whatever it was. It's just not going to happen. It's unrealistic. So what had to happen was the players on the pitch, and what Karl Robinson had to do was just really take the fact that I'm here on a long-term deal. I'm not going to get sacked. I've got that sort of safety barrier in the fact I'm not going to get sacked. I've just now got to sort things out on the pitch, and I've just now got to hope that the players respond. The rumours about losing the dressing room, and when that starts coming out, it turns into, it does turn into a hole that you really can't get out of. And if you can get out of it, it's not easy to get out of because it's very, very difficult. And at that point, when that was coming out on the radio about has he lost the dressing room, he came out a lot very publicly saying things about his players, which isn't always ideal. We'll come on to the Swindon game in a minute, but things weren't looking great for Karl Robinson at that point, and it was a little bit worrying as fans. And then looking back now, it was definitely the right decision to keep Karl Robinson because he has definitely changed the way that we've been playing. We'll come on to how that is because there are positives. We're on a great run at the moment. Kaja says, "Yo, how you doing, my friend? How are you doing? Welcome back to the stream. It's great to see you in here." I'll ask you a question. How did you think this Oxford United season started? How were you thinking? What were you thinking at this point? Because I tell you something, I was a little bit worried early on. I'm glad we didn't sack Karl Robinson. I know it's easy for us to say now. It's really easy to say don't sack Karl Robinson. Now we're on a good run. But back then there were questions to be asked. There was situations that we were getting into, and I was a little bit concerned. I'm not going to lie to you. But looking back, like I said, it was a good decision. We had some really, really we had some good games in between that, and then obviously the big one was obviously Swindon. I think we can all remember the Swindon one. It's one of my most successful podcasts I've done since the start of the season. It's been a very, very successful one on the podcast. Not for the right reasons, unfortunately, for the bad reasons. We had a lot of Swindon fans, we had a lot of Oxford fans come on there. Most of them were Swindon fans coming on there and taking the mick out of us. And I think that's pretty justified to say. To be honest, I think that's pretty fair. If I'm being honest, I think I think it was pretty justified. I think we would do the same. It kind of says a bit dodgy at the start, but we trusted the process. I think we had to trust the process because the process wasn't going to change with Karl Robinson, and we weren't going to be able to take Karl Robinson out of the process because we'd given him such a long-term deal. It was a bit dodgy, but we had to sort of hold on in there and hope that it did just change sooner rather than later. I mean, I don't think we could have changed any later. I think we would have been completely out of it. We will come on now to talk about how far we are away from where we want to be, the playoffs, the promotion hunt. That's where we want to be. And you just think, I know it's if, buts and maybes. I know we can't look too much back and nothing's going to change. But what you can say is, if we had started the season much better, think where we would have been, because we're on great form now. We're really playing good football. We're back to our best, but it was difficult. And then obviously we had the Swindon game, which, like I said, was a disaster. It was a disaster of a game. It was an absolutely shambolic performance. We went 1-0 up, and then obviously it all just fell apart. It absolutely fell apart. It was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And at that point, I thought, this could be a problem. This could. I don't think it could be. This is a problem. This is a serious issue we're in now, whereby if if it was a situation where obviously it all went a little bit wrong after that, with obviously the pre-match stuff. Carl Robinson came out publicly and started, I wouldn't say attacking Sykes, but he came out very openly and said he wasn't very happy with Sykes. He hasn't really been in the squad since then. It hasn't been great. Things started getting a little bit out of hand. Has he lost the dressing room? All of this came out. It was a little bit of a disaster. But looking back now, and I know it's easy to say now, and this is looking back on the season, the first half of the season we've had at Oxford. It's easy to say that now, but that Swindon game was a turning point in my opinion. That Swindon game was a really, really big turning point where I think a lot of the players went, and a lot of the manager as well, realised at this point, we've just got to turn this round. You know, the fans are very, very nervous at this point. We're in a very, very difficult place as a football club on the pitch, and the fans as well off the pitch are in a very, very difficult place. And when that happens, it just is a problem. It is a real problem when this happens. And it was a bit of a disaster. You know, it was a bit of a disaster, but it definitely, I think we sort of needed that wake-up call, that kick up the backside where we go, something needs to change now. You know, it's got to change now. We're in a really bad position. We have to change. And I mean, thankfully it did change, because in the end, you know, in the end, we then did go on and have a few decent results, and then it did change after that Swindon game. We look at the results now. After that Swindon game, we went unbeaten, which again shows that was a big turning point. We did have 3 draws in a row. You know, we did have 3 draws in a row. We drew to Ipswich, we drew to Hull, who were top of the league at the time, and I think they are now. I'm not entirely sure. It's either them or Lincoln, and we drew to Blackpool as well. So we drew 3 games after that, and that wasn't great. You know, 3 games, taking 3 points. At the position we were in, it was okay, but we definitely needed more from that. But that Swindon game was a turning point. I don't know about you. Give your thoughts on the chat where you think our turning point was. And more than that, what do you reckon the turning point was? What do you reckon the turning point was for the season? Because I think it was a Swindon game. Since then, we've been unbeaten. I think we all realised, the players realised, that this is going to be a disaster if it continues the way it is. So I'd be interested to see what you think in the chat. This is live as well. If you're watching this as a normal episode of the podcast, welcome. Subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a like. If you're watching this as live as well, leave a like on this episode of the podcast. But give your thoughts on that turning point. Where do you think that went? Where do you think we sort of shifted? Things shifted really. You know, Cash has already said in the chat. You know, we did have to trust the process. But when did that process change? Because it was looking like it was a process of a long, dark, gloomy path process, but it did then eventually change, and we did sort of see a little bit of light. We did eventually see, a real change in our fortune. We did eventually change to play much better, and we did then start seeing results on the pitch being much better as well, which is important, of course, because we needed it to. You know, we really, really needed it to. It was important that those things did change. I mean, looking at it, obviously I've got the notes here as well, but we got a few draws. We then obviously made a few tactical changes after that Swindon game. A big point obviously was Eastwood being dropped. That was a big tactical change that Carl Robinson made. A huge decision with his selection as well. We did sort of start seeing a bit of a consistent team. Obviously Sykes was pretty much, I wouldn't say dumped out of the first team, but he wasn't in the first team squad for the next 2 or 3 games. Things started to change, and Carl Robinson had to do it. And the big one was changing the goalkeeper. A very, very trusted player for Oxford United. Eastwood, of course, a player that's been at Oxford United for a long time. I'd say a fan favourite. We all love Eastwood, but this season, and obviously the goal that got kicked out of got us knocked out of us the playoffs at the end of last season. All of that started like coming into a bit of an issue. It was a ball of issues, and it was just rolling and rolling. It was like a snowball. The more you roll it, the more issues and the more just sort of get collected onto it, and the more issues just grew and grew and grew, and eventually the snowball just smashed on the floor. Something had to change, and obviously then Carl Robinson made the big decision to drop the goalkeeper, which a lot of people were asking for earlier on in the season. To be honest with you, he sort of stayed with him. He sort of just like trusted him, I think, but then it had to be the decision. The decision had to come that Eastwood was going to have to take a step back, and then obviously we saw Stevens come in, and I thought Stevens has done very, very well. I thought Stevens has been very, very good since he's come in, and since then, he went on to get 2 clean sheets, and we hadn't had a clean sheet before then under Eastwood in the season. So he did make the change, but it did pay off. It was important, and I looking back, it was a good decision. It's difficult to see a bit of a a really influential player, a really good player at Oxford United that's been very, very trusted and things like that. But it had to be done. They had to change something, and they did change it. And I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree now it was a good decision. Like I said, people were calling for it to happen earlier, but I think it had to happen, and it did happen eventually. Big decision, and obviously, like Carl Robinson said, he said it is one of, if not the biggest selection issue and the biggest managerial issue that he's made all of his in the whole of his managerial career, which says something, because to say that, it proves it's a big decision and it was something that had to be done. But then since then, I mean, since that happened, currently since then and currently still now, we're on a 7-game unbeaten run, which is incredible to think about. To think we're on an unbeaten run now, and I don't mean unbeaten as in 6 draws and a win. I'm talking unbeaten run where we've had, and we've had 3 draws and 4 wins in there as well. Matthew Bell, Matthew Bell says if it hasn't been for COVID or waterlogged pitch, exactly, man, exactly. You're spot on there, mate. You are spot on. Where would we be? We're doing a mid-season review, but we could be. This is 7 games now, where we're 7 games postponed, and they've all been really reasons where Oxford United have been out of control. That we haven't really been able to control any of those situations. Is actually really underrated reason, not an excuse, but a factor as to why I believe we probably did struggle. I think that's the reason we probably did struggle at the start of the season, because we had so many games postponed. Charlie says hello, leave a like, all of you, on this episode of the podcast. It'd be much appreciated. How are you doing, Charlie? I've got a few questions for you people as well. One of them being, where do you think the turning point was, Oxford United? Where do you think the turning point was? I'll ask you people in the chat. Thank you for coming along. I really, really do appreciate it. Give your thoughts on where you think things started to change. What factor was it that started to change? But sort of leading on from Matthew's point, we've got 6 people right now. How are you all doing? Leave a like on this episode of the podcast. Welcome. We're doing the mid-season review. How are you all doing? Where's the turning point for you people? We've got six people in here right now. Where do you think the Oxford United turning point was? And how are you all doing? Just say hello. I'll say hello to all of you. Just say hello. And welcome to the podcast episode. It's a banger. We're doing the mid-season review. But leading on to Matthew's point, it's actually a really underrated reason as to why I think we might have started slow. Football is all about momentum, it's all about consistency, and without that, you won't be successful. You look at last season, when we sort of pushed on to get those playoffs, that came from consistency. That came from, players, getting confidence off games, going into games with confidence, going into games really starting to trust each other, really start playing well. And that's what we had to do. We really did have to start doing that. We had to play with a bit more confidence, and that's how you get consistency. And like Matthew says again, there are a few comments, I'll be reading out all of you. Charlie, I see your comments, man. Elijah Clark, I see how you're doing. Elijah Clark says, love what you're doing, keep it up, man. Elijah, I love your comment. Thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. Thank you to everybody that watches this episode of the podcast. I really do appreciate you coming in and saying hello. Elijah, I haven't seen you in the chat before. I apologize if you have been. I haven't seen you, but welcome. I love your comment. Those sort of things really do make my day and really do make this worth it. I love what I do, but when people when I see that other people are enjoying it, and when people enjoy what happens on the podcast, it does mean a lot. So I thank you so much for that. Charlie says Stevens coming into the lineup, or maybe the draw against Hull, as they were top. 100%, man, 100%. I think Stevens was coming into the lineup was a big factor. I've spoken about it, but I think that's a really underrated point. But it was a big change, because a lot of people a lot of people can sort of be like, oh, changing the goalkeeper, it's not that much of a deal. But when you change that goalkeeper, that difference you make is a lot. I don't know if any of you have played in defence before, if you've actually played football or anything, or watched football. When a goalkeeper changed, it's easier if you've played defence or you've played in a team or whatever. You'll notice a difference when you put a new goalkeeper behind you. That defence, there's a lot of different. There's a real difference, because you've got someone different behind you. There's something different behind you, and for a long time we've had Eastwood between the sticks for Oxford United, so it is a big change. And it's a change that paid off. So you can only really congratulate Carl Robinson for that. It's a big thing to do, and at the end, it turned out to be a really good thing that happened, and that's what I mean. It's a really, really good. Really good situations come out of it, really, because we've been very, very good in goal as well. And of course, that whole draw, like you said, Charlie, was huge, because they were top of the league. We got confidence. We scored a goal. It was big. It's really, really big. Charlie says, at the top of the table. Elijah says, I've already read your comment, man. Matthew Bell says, the 1-1 draw against Hull with the fans at the ground, 100%. And that's another thing that we haven't really spoken about, is fans in the ground. Fans in the ground. It's not happening at the moment, and hopefully that will change. It's not looking great at the moment, let's be honest, but when a selected amount of fans were allowed back in the ground, that was a big change. The fans were there. The players could actually physically see the fans. The players could physically see who they're playing for. That's a big thing. I think that's a lot of things, and that's why this season has been a weird one. You look at the Premier League. Look at the Premier League. Look at lots of football. Things have changed now. Football fans aren't in the stadium. But when we did briefly have fans in the stadium playing, watching those players, it probably did make a big difference. In fact, I wouldn't say probably. It definitely would have made definitely contradicting myself there. It would have made a huge difference to for those players. And yeah, 100% that is a big thing, having those fans back in the stadium. Kajo says Northampton game, to be honest, lots of goals and a boost and a real boost. 100%. When we look back on that Northampton game was after those 3 draws. So before that Northampton game, obviously we had Ipswich, we had Hull, and then Blackpool, and then that big win against Northampton. And I have to agree, man. I really do have to agree. I think that Northampton game was a big one. We kept a clean sheet. We scored 4 goals. It was really, really big. All these chats going through right now, I really do appreciate you coming in. Elijah says, it's my first time here. Well, welcome. 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 It's your first time. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed already, people, that's not just Elijah. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We're on the road to 140 subscribers. I think we're on 136 right now. It might have changed, but I think we are on 136 subscribers. Leave a like as well. There's 6 people watching this right now. If we could have, 4, 6 of you leave a like, we'll have 6 likes, which would be very, very impressive. I really do appreciate that. I appreciate all of you coming in. Ahmed says, sorry for joining late, big boy. Up the yellows, 100%. No worries, man. No worries for joining late. And up the yellows indeed. No game though last weekend, so we're still itching to get back on the field. I remember I was still taking down my Christmas decorations, during that Burton game, and that's ages ago. We're now what's the date today? The 18th of January. The 18th of January, and we're still not had a game since then. That is unbelievable, and so disappointing, obviously, but out of our control. And of course, I have to say it, obviously, and I do mean it. Obviously, health comes for football. It's the way it is, but it wasn't last week. That was a waterlogged pitch. And I don't know if there's any Northampton fans watching this, and a few might. I doubt any now, but I think a few probably would have done, or will do when this goes out as a video. How have you got a waterlogged pitch? It rained for one night. How have you got a waterlogged pitch after one night? You know what I mean? That's the sort of thing you get at Sunday League football, but this is a professional football, and we're having waterlogged pitches after one night of rain. It's not great, is it? It's not great. Trying to keep up. Where are we? Matthew says that the fans going back to the ground for that short amount of time really showed the players who they're playing for. 100%. I think that's what we said really. It's easy for watching us at home, watching these games at home, but when you've actually got fans physically in the stadium, and when you've got fans physically watching you play football, it's a little bit the same. You do get a buzz when you've got real people there watching you. You can have any sound effect on a tannoy, you can have any sound effect on a sound system in a stadium, but it's not the same. You might hear the cheers for a sound system at the stadium, but you look around you, there's no one in there. It's so important that you have fans in there. And I think Oxford United, I spoke about it a lot. I think that first half of the season, I think we've really noticed, and I do think we have this sense of Oxford United do really base a lot on the fact that we have an incredible fan base and that we have a real sense of unity. We really get behind the players. We're constantly at the stadium. We're always making a noise. And when that's gone for the players as well, I bet it's really, really difficult. And, understandably, it was a very, very difficult thing. And we did miss the fans 100%. And when they were back for a short amount of time, I think it really did give us that confidence. And now they're not now. I still think, even though they had that brief spell, like Matthew said, where they did have fans, it's like just reminding them that for those 3 games, must have been about 2 or 3 games maximum we had fans in there. I can't quite remember. But during that brief spell, they realised that they did have fans still there. And obviously, they knew that, but they physically saw fans in there. And now they can remember what it's like to have fans. I think that's really, really important. Elijah says, do you feel there is such a thing as a home advantage without fans? Really, really good question. And give your thoughts. Down below of Elijah's question. I mean, I'm going to answer it as well, but why don't you answer it? Do you think there's an advantage when you play at home without home fans, or when you go away without any home fans there? It's an interesting question, and it's one that probably is going to be, it's a bit of a debate to it. There's lots of sides to that. Technically there is. I mean, you do have to travel to the game. You're not in usual surroundings. I think it definitely would make a difference earlier. Well, I still see now where The dressing room situation is abysmal. We saw Carl Robinson regularly remind us how poor the facilities were away from home. Obviously, we can't actually go into the dressing room. As players can't actually go into the normal away dressing room. It's a very, very difficult place. It's a very different surrounding. So, understandably, it's a really, really difficult place to be when you're at home, when you're going away. That's not great facilities. I saw Oxford United. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Fleetwood, where I think they were literally put in in a little hall thing. It was like a room, like a random room. Behind the stadium, that isn't a great footballing surrounding. When you're going into a game, I'm not using that as an excuse as to why I don't think we won the game. By the way, I'm just saying that the question is, do you think that make a difference whether you're home and away without fans? I mean, I know there isn't fans in the changing room, but the actual playing away, the things more off the pitch as well aren't ideal. Without fans, and also obviously with COVID as well, that wouldn't normally happen. You technically, with the fans, I understand what you mean about, is there a real sense of home advantage? Probably not too much, but I do think when off the pitch stuff in the dressing room, that sort of thing, like I've just said, there are a few different things. Not specifically. Oh wow, I just got a new one, but I've got a few to catch up on. Charlie says 8 points off playoffs with 2 games in hand against 6th against Northampton and Doncaster. I'm pretty sure that's what you mean. I thought you were Donny van der Beek. I was like, what's going on there? Doncaster. If you were to win those, do you think if we were to win those, could the momentum, could we have the momentum really go for 6th place? I mean, yeah, we are currently, I've got it right now. As of now, we are 8 points away from the playoffs. We do have at least 1 game in hand on every team between where we are now and where the first playoff spot is, so 6th, except from Accrington, who've played 18 games this season. So I think they're 2 games. They've played 2 games less than we have, but we have got 2 games in hand. We take 6 points, like you just said there. I mean, logistically and mathematically, yeah, we probably could go into the playoffs. But we got a few games, a few interesting games before then, obviously. So, it'll be interesting to see what we see. Charlie says no game on Tuesday. No, we haven't got a game on Tuesday. Obviously, we were going to try and rearrange either the Wigan or Ipswich game to happen on Tuesday, but unfortunately, that won't be the case now. Which is a shame, really, because it would have been nice to get a game, really sort of continue that momentum, like Charlie says. Elijah says, not specifically for Oxford, but in the Premier League without fans, it seems like a neutral ground, so feels no advantage. I agree. I think definitely, without fans, home when you're at home and you don't have any home supporters, it is a little bit neutral, and we are seeing some crazy results in the Premier League this season. I mean, if there were fans at Villa with Liverpool, I mean, it's strange, isn't it? But it's like, I was going to say, if there are fans at Villa, would Villa have beaten Liverpool 7-2, for example? But, I mean, surely that wouldn't have hindered anything, because if you had Villa fans in there, yes, you'd have had Liverpool fans in there, but you've had more Aston Villa fans in there. So, would that have changed, or why would that have changed anything? So, I understand it is quite new. It is a neutral situation. But, could you take that as an example from the Premier League and bring that down to what it's like in League One? I don't know, maybe. Elijah says, although the build-up is different. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, the build-up is different. Like the changing room stuff, like before the game, the off-the-pitch stuff. There is a big difference there. And the build-up is very, very different without there as well. Now, I've got a few questions for you people as well, because obviously we are on a really, really good run now. But I've got a few questions for you people in the chat. I'll be really, really intrigued to see what you people think. To these questions, because I've got an interesting one. Who do you believe is our player of the first half of the season so far this season? So it's almost like the player of the season so far sort of thing, but based on the first half of the season, so up to the last game we played, which was Burton, who would you say has been Oxford United's best player? We've got a few more to come in. It's like a little awards thing. We've got a few little questions and players that I think we're going to give a few, we're going to sort of talk about, but the big one obviously is who do you believe is our player of the first half of the season. It's not a greatly named award. I mean, looking back, if this was going to be given out at the Oscars or anything like that, we probably would have had to given it a better name, a bit more of it's a bit wordy, should I say. It's not greatly worded, but you know what I mean. Who do you think is the best player so far this season? I'll be interested to see what the chat think. Because it's been incredible. We've got a lot of people in here at the moment, so it's a good time to ask. Who do you think has been the best player for Oxford United so far this season? Because I think it's interesting. It's a really interesting one. It's a really interesting one because there's been some good players. There's been some really good players for Oxford United so far this season. There's been some very interesting ones. But be interested to see what you think. We've got a few people in the chat right now. Why don't you tell me who has been the best player of the first half of the season? Apologies, it's a little bit wordy, but who do you think it would be? If you want me to word it better or explain what it means, I can say it like this: it was like player of the season, but halfway through. So it's like half a player of the season, like we're halfway through the season. So who do you think it was? I'll give mine while some of you give your thoughts as well. I'll be discussing all of yours that you put in the chat. We've got a few people in there right now, so give your thoughts in the chat right now. It'll be really interesting to see. Really interesting to see. I don't know Oxford too well. Who are the candidates, would you say? Okay, I'll give a few candidates. I'll give a few options because I feel like that is a very interesting one. But the other people are in there as well. If any of you do know any specific ones you want to do, feel free to leave them in the comments. But I'll give a few candidates. I'll give my winner. I think the best player so far this season has been Sam Long. That's who I'm going to say. I think Sam Long is definitely a candidate. I think Sam Long definitely should be it should be put in there for a shout. I think he's a quality player. I think he's been quality for Oxford United this season. But I think he probably could win another award, which was another one, which is who has been the biggest surprise so far this season. I think he probably could win that as well, because I think Sam Long has been a very interesting option this season as a bit of a surprise. I didn't think he was going to be as good as he was, because I didn't think how much game time he was going to get, but he's definitely been given a lot of game time. He's been very impressive. So I think Sam Long would definitely be an option. Other than that, who do I think? I think Gorin definitely deserves a shout. I think Gorin's had a really good season. I think he's so important. He consistently shows how important he is. I think he definitely deserves a shout. I'm trying to think of others. I mean, Matty Taylor. I mean, he is our top goal scorer. I mean, he is our striker. But I probably would say Taylor. I'd say Taylor's definitely got to be in there as a shout. He's got a few goals, more than a few goals. He's got quite a few goals this season. Obviously our top goal scorer, but yeah, give your thoughts. The best player of the season so far. I'll be interested to see what you people think. But yeah, Sam Long's definitely got to have a shout. Alex Gorin's definitely got to have a shout. Matty Taylor's definitely going to have a shout in there as well. So yeah, intrigued to see what you people believe is to be our best player of the season so far. But Sam Long's my winner, but by far I think he's been incredible at right back. Things didn't really work out for Sean Clare. Of course, he's gone out on loan to Burton. He was obviously meant to come in as he was going to come in as our attacking right back sort of thing. And it hasn't really worked out for him. He's gone out on loan, which isn't ideal when you bring a player in the summer. You don't really want to see him go out the door in January, especially on loan because of some poor performances. I'd say it's got to be Matty Taylor. Well, I mean, if you look at goals and you look at, he has been very good with goals this season. You know, he has been good. He's been a little bit inconsistent. I'd say a little bit inconsistent. Some games he's been out of there. He could have probably scored a few more goals, but he has been very good, and he has got a few goals. So Elijah's player of the season so far is Matty Taylor. Be interested to see what yours is, what other people's things is. We've got a few people in there right now. Give your thoughts on there. I've gone with Sam Long because I think Sam Long's been very good. Consistent, I'd say, not just very good. I'd say consistent. I think you've got to be consistent to be classified as the best player so far, and he has been consistent. But like I said, things didn't really work out for Sean Clare. We needed a player that could come in. We needed a player that was going to come in at right back and do a good job. We didn't really see Sam Long as an attacking fullback, but I definitely think he's come in and he's done really well. You know, he's done really well going forward as well. It hasn't just been defensive that he's been, because I think when we think Sam Long originally, I think we thought that he's better defensively than he is anything going forward. But I think defensively and going forward, he's been very impressive. So that's why I think Sam Long definitely deserves a shout. And I think Sam Long is a definite candidate for player of the season so far. Gorin as well is important. Elijah says Matty Taylor, and I think Matty Taylor's definitely got to be in for a shout as well. Atkinson's been very good of recent games. I think when we're looking at this sort of player of the season, we are sort of looking at who's been the best player in this good run, because I don't think there was any real candidate. No one really stood out when we were playing extremely badly. Other than Sam Long, I'd say. I think Sam Long wasn't ideal. I don't think Sam Long was very good. Was great, I'd say. Sorry. I think Sam Long was pretty good when we were even losing a few games. I remember the Fleetwood game; he got man of the match in that game. But generally, there hasn't been any unbelievable performance when we were on a bad run. But then since then, we've started to pick things up, which is great and what we want to see. So no, really happy with that. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap a few things up. I've got a few more. That's the main talking point. That's what I'm going to try and say. But no, yeah, we'll try and wrap this episode of the podcast up. Thank you very much to everyone that's tuned in. We had quite a few people in at one point, which is incredible. And thank you all so much for coming on to the podcast and watching this episode of the podcast. Whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching this as an episode of the podcast, I really do appreciate it. I thank you very much as well. Hopefully you have a good rest of your day. Now, obviously, we have got a game, hopefully. Fingers crossed, we have got a game against... The next game is against Bristol. Of course, Bristol is our next game on Saturday. Hopefully that game stays on. Hopefully we do have a game, and hopefully we can play that game against Bristol, because then we'll have a match reaction for Bristol, which will be incredible. I'm missing match reactions. The last one, like I said, was Burton. Since then, we've been having to find some content to bring to the podcast. And they've been good. Thank you. Oh, and also, the most recent one, the England one as well, was really, really good. And that actually did really, really well in the end. I was a little bit worried to see how that was going to go, because it's very, very different to sort of things that we normally do. So if you haven't checked that out, do check that out, please, because that'd be fantastic if you could. Leave that like as well. But no, I really, really do appreciate everyone that's tuned into this halfway match. I was going to say match, it's not really a match reaction, but it's a mid-season review of Oxford United this season. We're on a good run. We're 7 games unbeaten. Let's take it into the next game against Bristol. I'll see you next time. I'll see you on for the next episode of the Young Fan podcast. Of course, subscribe if you're new. Leave a like this episode as well. And I'll see you in a bit. See you later, people.